Hello and welcome to day 23 of the 40-day global study of Maimonides project in honor of my father's memory, Jack David Abramson. We're in the middle of chapter 5 where Maimonides is going into a little more detail about his philosophy of free will versus predeterminism, which, as we shall see, he considers absolutely central to Judaism. And of course, it deals with Teshuvah in a very profound way, as we shall see. So here's Halakha 5.3. This great point is essential. It is a pillar of the Torah and commandments, as it is written in Deuteronomy. See, I have placed before you this day life and good, and death and evil. And it is written, see, I have placed before you this day blessing and cursing. This means that the power is in your hands, and everything that a person wishes to do, any human act, is within one's power, whether it is good or evil. It is therefore written also in Deuteronomy, if only they would control their hearts, meaning the Creator does not force human beings, nor does God decree upon them that they must do good or evil. Rather, every choice is given to them. So we saw this idea a little bit earlier, and Maimonides will touch upon the possibility of proclivities, meaning that a person may be predisposed to a particular behavior, whether beneficial or otherwise, or a particular substance, beneficial or otherwise, and that may make the challenge of resisting something which is forbidden greater in that area as opposed to something else. But nevertheless, the fundamental rock bottom principle is that choice is nevertheless given. Some people may have more difficulty resisting X, Y, or Z activity, but nevertheless they do have the choice to do so. God forbid we should have other people's challenges. But at any rate, let's have a look at how Maimonides develops this concept a little further. If God had decreed that a person would be righteous or wicked, or if that there would be something that would draw a person from the very beginning of life to one of those two paths, to adopt a certain personality trait or quality or act in a certain way, these are like the proclivities are like leanings that a person might have to resist the pull of that current, but nevertheless it is not inexorable. A person can fundamentally resist it. Then he says in parentheses, as some unintelligent people fool themselves with horoscopes. This is an interesting and longer discussion. I treated a little bit in the commentary, but just very briefly right now, there is a long-standing astrological tradition in Judaism that has quite a bit of discussion in the Talmud, and particularly in the Kabbalistic tradition, that there's a debate at a very basic level as to the role of astrology, meaning our relationship to the heavenly constellations and so on. Do they allocate our destiny or not? Or as the Talmud puts it, Yesh mazal Yisrael or Ein mazal Yisrael. We're not going to go into it in great detail here, but suffice it to say, for example, that horoscopes as they're understood today, as you find in the newspapers and places like that, certainly don't meet the threshold of rigor that the Kabbalists would use for determining any kind of information. The Ibn Ezra, for example, has a great medieval commentator, has a discussion of the 7 different factors which can affect horoscopes, which would include things like, time zones and climates and stations of life into which a person was born. It's a fascinating discussion. I gave a lecture on it elsewhere, but you can check it out online if you want. But for Maimonides, to be sure, horoscopes in this concept have no meaning whatsoever to chart a person's destiny. Then how could God command us through the prophets to do this or do not do that, or improve your ways and do not follow the path of the wicked, if a person were, from the moment of creation, already subject to a decree or the like that preordains some inclination, and that the person is unable to change this, right? The whole system of God commanding anything would be absurd if we did not have the power to follow that command. At the same time, we should also have the power to disobey that command, because then that makes the choice actually a real choice. What place would there be for the entire Torah, and by what logic or justice would the wicked be deserving of punishment, or the righteous of reward, right? If there's no choice, then reward and punishment are meaningless. They're capricious. Will the judge of the universe not be just, right? The whole system of justice depends on the notion that there is something called choice. Do not be confused and ask, How could it be that a person could do whatever he pleased and his actions are entirely within his control? Is there anything in the universe that is not under the control of the Creator and not according to God's will? Is it not written in Psalms, whatever God wants, God does, whether in heaven or on earth? Know that all God desires, God does. Nevertheless, our actions are within our control. So here Maimonides points to the real difficulty in the free will versus predeterminism problem. Meaning, if God is, let's say, all-knowing, and we have free choice, then how is it possible that our choice is real if God already knows what we will have chosen? Isn't God's knowledge of our choice some kind of factor that impugns the power of our choice? Meaning our choice isn't real. God really knows what we're going to do. In other words, we're on these railroad tracks and we cannot get off them. We are going straight ahead, barreling along, and thinking that we're masters of our destiny, but in fact we are not. That's really the question. So Maimonides says it's not a question. How is this so? Just as the Creator willed that fire and wind should rise, and water and earth should descend, and that the constellations should encircle the globe, and all other creations of the universe behave in the manner that God willed, so too did God will that a human being have power and control over his actions. There would be nothing that would coerce or entice except his own self, his own mind, which was given to him by God to do whatever he is able to do. Meaning it's built into the fabric of reality. Even though we can't understand it, there is God's ubiquitous and God's omnipotence and God's omniscience. He knows everything. And at the same time, we have the reality of free will. Not an illusion, but a reality. Beyond our understanding, but nevertheless it is there. Now Maimonides won't let that go entirely. He'll continue. Therefore, a person is judged according to his actions. If he does good, he is rewarded. If he does evil, he is punished. This is what the prophet had said, from your own hands has this come to pass, for they chose their path. In this manner, Solomon said, rejoice, young man, in your youth, and know that all these things will be brought before divine judgment. That is to say, know that the power to choose is within your control, and in the future you will be required to provide an accounting. Okay, let's stop here. Tomorrow, when we get into Halacha 5.5, he's going to push the point just a little further and say, wait a minute, how is it possible that God can know what we're going to do, and yet we have the freedom to change our minds, as it were? We'll look at that a little bit more tomorrow, okay? Thank you very much for listening.